Let's now get you the updates that are happening in the big elections in Sri Lanka, where the counting of votes that have been cast since morning for the presidential elections has begun. Now, all eyes are on the three main candidates, President Ranil Wickremesinghe, the main opposition leader Sajith Premadasa, and the Marxist-leaning challenger Anura Kumara Dissanayake. The results will demonstrate whether Sri Lankans approve of Wickremesinghe's leadership in the wake of the very fragile economic recovery that Sri Lanka is now trying to stage. Reconstruction of debt under an International Monetary Fund program and the rising cost of living under the Sri Lankan voting system. The citizens have indicated their top three candidate choices on the ballot. A candidate has to secure nearly about 50% of the votes plus one to be declared a winner. If no candidate meets a clear, simple majority, then a second round of counting will take place. So as the counting is underway, Sri Lanka's election commissioner said that the country had the most peaceful election ever and will thoroughly review any discrepancies to ensure transparency and fairness throughout the electoral process. Earlier in the day, voting progressed under heavy security, with the booths being manned by public officials and also the police. Largely, the voting proceeded peacefully, and the Sri Lankan presidential election witnessed a voter turnout of over 70%, the highest being the cities of Nuwara, Elia and Gampaha, with 80% voter turnout. Meanwhile, the lowest voter turnout was recorded was at about 68%.
සුළු සිද්ධීන් මේස ඡන්ද විමසීමට ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් බලපාන සිද්ධි කිසිවක් වාර්තා වෙලා නැහැ. ප්‍රචණ්ඩ ක්‍රියාවන් සම්බන්ධව කිසිදු වාර්තාවක් මේ වෙනතෙක් ලැබී නැහැ.
මධ්‍යස්ථාන 10කින් මෙතනට එනවා, කියන්නේ තනි 10කින් එනවා. ඒවා ඔක්කොම පෙට්ටි කීය විතර වෙද්දී අන්තිම වෙද්දීද?
අපි හිතනවා සියලුම ඡන්ද පෙට්ටි පැමිණීම පැය එකමාරක් දෙකක් ඇතුළත අවසන් වේවි කියලා. 6ට ඉස්සෙල්ලා අපි අවිස්සාවේල්ල වැනි ප්‍රදේශවල තියෙන ඡන්ද පෙට්ටි.
Now, this was the first election in Sri Lanka since the 2022 crisis, when the country's economy had buckled and defaulted on the foreign debt due to critical foreign exchange shortage. Now, here's are some of the voter reactions that we have seen.
අපි තන්දයක් දාලා අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ අපිට සාහනයක් ලැබෙන්නයි. මොකක් හරි දෙයකින් කෑම මිල මොකක් හරි දෙයකින් අඩු වෙනවා නම් එයා තමයි අපිට ජනාධිපති.
සාධාරණ විදිහට රට ගෙනියන්න පුළුවන් නම් හොඳයි. සාධාරණ විදිහට රට ගෙනියන්න පුළුවන් නම් හොඳ නායකයෙක් වෙන්න ඕනේ. දිනුදු පොල් කියන බලන්න ඕනේ. රටේ හැමෝටම එක විදිහටම ඉන්න පුළුවන් විදිහට වාතාවරණය හැදෙන්න ඕනේ.
And also to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is expected to happen as the counting of the votes is underway, we are being joined by Dr. Aruna Kulatunga, who is a political analyst and a former advisor to the Ministry of Primary Industries, who is joining us live from Colombo. Dr. Kulatunga, this is a very crucial election for the people in Sri Lanka, considering the fact that it is happening just 2 years after the very, enormous amount of turmoil that we witnessed in Sri Lanka. Give us a sense of what the people in Sri Lanka at this moment are feeling as they've voted today to elect their next president.
Thank you for having me on this discussion, first of all. Going back 2 years ago, we were in the brink of bankruptcy. In fact, I would say we were bankrupt. We defaulted in our sovereign bond payments, loans that were due to multiple lenders. We had huge issues with import of oil. We did not have electricity. We had a number of very serious problems, very similar to what you're seeing in Bangladesh at the moment. 2 years on, none of those problems are there. We have, as of yesterday, we even managed to come to agreement in principle with our international sovereign bondholders, who agreed to take approximately 35% or thereabout haircut on the bonds that they're having, on the repayments of those bonds. With all of that, however, and this is a very, very, how should I say, a very difficult situation. Sri Lankans, especially those who are in the Gen Z, who were born after the 1990s, are seeing all of these problems having a root cause within the established political setup of Sri Lanka,
Right.
where it's virtually one party that has been ruling this country since its independence. I'm saying virtually one party simply because there was a split of the United National Party just after independence, and that split still continues. Two main parties comes from that split. Now there is a third party which we call the NPP, the National Progressive Front. They have come up as a very viable alternative to especially the young people
Right.
who have been chafing at the bit for a long time now.
I think it's interesting that you say this, and you also mentioned that in the last 2 years, Sri Lanka has managed to tide over the financial instability that it found itself because of bankruptcy. But the fact is, inflation has been very high, taxation has been pretty high, and a lot of people in Sri Lanka are saying that they are feeling the cost of living crisis, where it's almost impossible to make ends meet in the current financial and political system that they've got. With that being the case, do you think the people of Sri Lanka will again repose their faith in Ranil Wickremesinghe?
First of start off with, inflation is actually quite low. It's less than 2%. The cost of living given the inflation is low, since 2022 when the Aragale started, the cost of living has actually not changed. What has changed is taxation. So we have almost 35% tax at the top tier, whereas anybody who's earning less than 200,000 rupees, which is about 80% of the population, gets no tax.
Right.
So at the top tier, you get 35% off. So that's about less than 5% of the total population. So those facts are a little bit skewed, but I completely agree on the fact that there's especially within the, as I said again, Gen Z, who are more aware of the global situations that are going around. They see this as basically a situation where they can't progress in their lives. So a lot of the people have been leaving the country in the last 2 years. A lot of the young people who can get a job abroad has been leaving.
Right.
So there is an issue there. Definitely, it's nothing to do with actual cost of living, because if you start from 2022 onwards, inflation is almost zero. Taxation is high, but only for the very high earners.
You know, it's interesting that you say that inflation is almost 0 to 2%. It'll be interesting to see as to what a common Sri Lankan person, of course, has to say for that. Thank you very much indeed, however, Dr. Aruna Kulatunga, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.